We're hearing from Hebrews 6:13 to 7:28 this week. We're getting to the heart of the speaker's message to us. So it is unfortunate that the central part of the message of Hebrews happens to be exactly the place where most of us switch off. The speaker appears to be banging on about a high priest with an unpronounceable name, and the more important it all seems to him, the more alienated we feel, because we just don't get it. How can a priest from ancient history have any relevance to our lives today? We might sit up and take notice when we realise that hope, not the priesthood, is the subject actually under discussion here. Hope, what it is, what it does, how to stay in contact with it. Hope, in other words, the real thing, not the rather nebulous idea behind such phrases as, let's hope for the best, eh? I hope the weather stays nice, or see you tomorrow. Hopefully. The hope that we're talking about when we say things like this amounts to nothing more than an optimistic feeling inside us. We would miss it if it weren't there, but it doesn't really do a lot for us. The hope being talked about here in Hebrews is strong enough to be an anchor for the soul, firm and secure. Chapter 6, verse 19. It is a thing of real substance. Two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie. Chapter 6, verse 18. Those two things consist in his promise to us, verse 13, and his oath that he swears by himself, 17. That's Jesus. We need hope that's more than a feeling. We have in fact fled, verse 18, from false hopes to take hold of the real thing, so we need to be paying attention. Melchizedek or no Melchizedek. When you know what you're talking about, it is possible to measure the strength of hope. Possible to compare the reliability of two different sources of hope. This is exactly what the speaker is doing in chapter 7, comparing the hope of the Jews with that of the disciples of Jesus. Of course, hope that comes from feelings never really stays still for long enough to be measured or compared, but nonetheless, any alternative sources of hope that we might consider turning to are asked some pretty tough questions in this chapter. Remember that hope is the promise of God to his people and his personal word on that promise. In chapter 6 verse 16 there was a very brief kind of how it works, the oath. And we get it. If we take out a loan, we might promise to make the building society their payments, but they will want some kind of a guarantee. Who is our guarantor for God's promise? Well, only God. There's no one higher to refer to. And that's why we're talking about priests here. Access to God is through the priest. So pick your priest with great care. We're talking about your hold on hope. Or rather, let God pick your priest, since he already has, and he alone knows how you and I can have access to him. But it does happen that you and I, as well as the original hearers of this message, get tempted to explore other sources of hope. So here are some questions that the speaker seems to want to ask of whatever it is that we're relying on to supply us with hope. Ready? Question 1. This hope you're holding on to, where does it come from? For the Jews, it was from the descendants of Levi, chapter 7, verse 5. But they came along long after the initial promise of God to Abraham. For the Christians, it comes from long before the promise to Abraham. See chapter 7, verse 3. So, what are the origins of the lifeline on hope that we're holding on to today? Question 2. Let's talk substance, status, stature. Is your lifeline on hope big enough, strong enough, secure enough? Levi's tradition is shown in verse 9 of chapter 7 to be inferior to Jesus' kind of priesthood. King of righteousness, king of peace. This is what God's rulers are like. Melchizedek's titles are ultimately owned by Jesus. If I'm just hoping to win the lottery, what kind of ruler has taken possession of my life for the duration? Question 3. Does it deliver? The law, verses 11 and 19, didn't. And Jesus does. How about that alternative hope source? Question 4. Is it permanent or temporary? The Jews had to trust the ancestral links in the chain of hope. Chapter 7, verse 16. We have the evidence of the resurrection of Jesus to rely on, the power of an indestructible life. We are testing the integrity of our connection with real hope here. Our priest meets our need. Chapter 7, verse 26. Why would we make a change? Unless we prefer false hope.